All right. Well, let's get this show on the road. So, my name's Jim Wilcox. For those of you who have not been here before, welcome to a Wednesday afternoon in the Midwest session of Grab and Go Growth Tactics. This is a half an hour designed to be full of tactical information that you can take away and use today. I am joined by one of my two esteemed colleagues here. I'll let Tim introduce himself.
Thanks, Jim. My name is Tim Berry. I am the owner of the Sandler Performance Center in Fort Worth, Texas, the wonderful, magnificent Republic of Texas. Happy to be here as always every week, and here to talk about a hugely important thing to me, because we're talking on meetings, but in John's absence, John Vanderslice is the handsome guy in the middle of your screen, and he is the cat that owns the Sandler Performance Center in South New Jersey. Not that there's anything wrong with northern New Jersey or central New Jersey, but he's adamant in that he's in South New Jersey, over near the Philadelphia area, and he is unable to join us today, but we wish him the best of luck in his endeavors today. And Jim, I'll throw it back to you.
Yeah, so I'm in Fort Wayne, Indiana, and South Bend, Indiana, and doing great things here, just as Tim and John are in their respective territories, or businesses. So we're going to talk about meeting effectiveness today. So if you've been here before, you know that I'm going to ask you to get your chat fingers ready. Want you to type in some comments. So the first comment I want you to respond to is, in one word, how would you describe meetings that you run? So if you're running a meeting on a regular basis, if that's part of your responsibility, type in now one word, James Blandy. How would you describe the meetings that you run? So James's one word is short, sweet, to the point. Efficient, curt, well, I like that. Formative, motivating, awesome. Oh, Sam Krause, too long. All right. Here's what I want you to keep them coming. Love it. Keep them coming. Now, the second question, you guys are getting bonus today. If you've been here before, we typically start out with one. Here's what I want you to do. In one word, how would others describe the meeting that you run? So time to put yourself in their shoes. What would they say about your meetings? And be honest. Be honest with yourself. What would they say about it? How would they describe it? Notice the chat came to an abrupt halt, Tim.
No doubt about it. Leo says educational. Andrew, efficient. Enlightening from James Blandy again.
Oh, he added euphoric in there too.
Yeah.
So, absolutely. Yeah. So, inclusive, mind-opening, very nice. All right. So I want you guys to think, as you're running meetings, I mean, we have the best of intentions, certainly, with running meetings, but how do they look from the other person's point of view? So we're going to talk about meetings, meeting performance, running effective meetings, etc. So what are some things that kill good meeting intentions? I found this graphic and I absolutely love it. There's nothing worse than a boring meeting. And we could add in to that one, because when I saw that particular graphic on this cartoon, I thought about death by PowerPoint. That makes for a boring meeting, which is ironic because I'm running a meeting right now using PowerPoint. But, these are short, sweet, to the point, and not death by PowerPoint. Tim, I have on here messy communication. What do we mean by messy communication in a meeting?
I think, when I hear messy communication, I think that people are all over the place. There's not a real focused set point or agenda. You get some arguing back and forth, people kind of digging in on their, to protect themselves and not thinking of the bigger picture. So those are the things that I think of when I hear messy communication.
Absolutely. I look at, you mentioned people arguing back and forth. We'll talk about that a little later, but that's something that can kill a good meeting buzz or good meeting intentions. Steve Phones put emotional vomiting, absolutely. You know, anytime somebody uses a meeting to get their needs met, that can make it messy, that can kill the meeting vibe. Having that meeting where that key person decides they're going to be MIA that day or they're a no-show, right? Having that person that's missing in action. So not having accountability there. Certainly there are times when something comes up, but you know, I know that I've been in those situations where people would pick and choose when they wanted to show up or not show up to a recurring meeting. Aggressiveness during a meeting, and then people not being on time, showing up 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 5 minutes late. James wrote, showing up and throwing up, right? That's showing up and just getting dumped on, right? Those can kill good meeting intentions. And so we want to be cognizant of those things that can kill good meeting intentions. Is there anything else that we're missing here, Tim? What are other things that can kill a good meeting vibe or good meeting intentions?
Yeah, I think for me, you had mentioned death by PowerPoints, but for me, it's actually just death by meeting. And so I know we're going to get into that in a minute, but something that'll kill a good meeting intention is to have so many meetings that you're having meetings to have meetings and not having a solid purpose. So I know we'll get into that, but that was the thing. If you have 52 meetings in a day, yeah, that's a problem because you're having meetings just to fill your need to have a busy calendar.
I train a lot of healthcare executives, and that's one of their number one challenges is how do I get out of all of this meeting activity that I'm involved in? All I do is go from meeting to meeting to meeting to meeting. I never feel like anything gets done, et cetera. Certainly that happens all over the place. So how do we orchestrate some good meetings? That is the question here that we want to answer. That is the thing that we want to give you guys tactics on. And before we can even get to that, we've got to decide on a process and a format for our meetings. There are a ton of processes and formats out there. There are some that are popular today that people might use. There are some that are, I know when we're training on organizational excellence, we train on effective meeting processes. How do we structure meetings that deliver, drive results, encourage engagement, et cetera? That's part of what we're talking about here today. We should not be winging it out there, right? We've got to find a good meeting format, meeting process that helps us get stuff done, and that one that fits our culture. And so if you have a good meeting process, feel free to throw it in the chat for others to see. I don't know, Tim, in your experience, if you've come across some.
Yeah, I mean, mine tend to be, my personal meetings in my own organization, they happen to be structured. So there's a set agenda. You know, people know ahead of time that there's resources that need to be brought to the meeting and people need to be prepared. It's things like that. And then, you know, we have it's almost like a board of directors meeting where you've got the confirmation of the previous meeting's minutes. You know, you get into the agenda for the current meeting, and then, you know, people wrap with specific next steps and accountability pieces. So that's the type of meeting structure that I use and I condone and teach.
Absolutely. First step, and you mentioned this, got to have a rock solid agenda, right? We've got to have clarity there. So we should be starting with the end in mind. So the question to ask yourself in your head is, what will we, or what do I, or what do the attendees want to learn, do, or experience in this meeting? What is the purpose of this meeting? Pre-meeting planning is key. I think you referenced that, Tim, because you said have a rock solid agenda. You know what materials have got to be brought, or attendees know what they need to bring to the meeting. And so whether it's I need some reporting or data or numbers, et cetera, we should be coming with those so we can run effective and efficient meetings. The whole idea is to have meetings for purpose. By the way, and I'll ask Tim to expand on this. If we have a meeting that does not obviously have a purpose, should probably cancel it, right? Why are we having that meeting? Let's not have it. If you're having meetings because that's the way we've always done it, probably ought to scrap that meeting and maybe start over or do something a little bit different, especially if that meeting is not productive. Tim, you got any other thoughts on that one?
Yeah, I think when just to build a little bit on what Jim just said, if you've got a Monday morning sales meeting every single Monday morning, 52 weeks a year, and nobody comes prepared and nobody knows what the heck it's there for, that's probably a good indicator that you don't have a rock solid agenda. There's not really a specific purpose other than to do some general reviewing. And so I think that's what, again, if you're going to get into the business of having effective meetings versus just having a lot of quantity of meetings, then you've got to have a purpose.
There's some things that we'll talk about with clients, Tim, when we first get together with them, especially when we're talking about management, leadership, or organizational excellence. What types of meetings do we need to have in our organization? What's the frequency of those meetings? Certainly, if you're thinking about that on this call, reach out to us. We're happy to help there. One of the main things, because we train a lot of salespeople, we talk about having some sort of daily to a couple times a week to a weekly check-in with the entire team. Now, I've worked in organizations where we'd have a daily stand-up that was both in person and or virtual. We've had other times where it's a weekly check-in. There's purpose behind that. The other thing that goes along with that, especially if you're on this call and you manage salespeople, is having some sort of weekly individual meeting with your people those are quick hit meetings where you're talking about behavior and pipeline, right? Are you doing the things that you committed to do? If not, why not? How do I help remove roadblocks for you? Or how do I help you get out of your own way? Because as a manager, those are two of our main responsibilities. And then based on the behavior that you did, what is the effect on pipeline? Am I moving things from left to right in a pipeline or out of a pipeline? And so those are a couple of suggestions from a sales perspective. But certainly if you're thinking about, structured meetings, what to have them, when to have them, why to have them, reach out to us on that one. We're happy to help. Now, some questions to ask yourself pre-meeting, right? As you're working on your agenda, as you're working on the overall meeting itself. Number one, what's my purpose? What is the reason to have this meeting? If you can't answer that question, ought not to have that meeting. Second one, what will we learn to experience by the end of the meeting? Third one, is there a more effective or efficient way to accomplish this? In other words, do I really need this meeting, right? Do I really need to do it this way? Or am I doing it because it's the way that we've always done it? What logistics are important for this meeting? Do I need to have it in the office? Is it going to be by Zoom? Is it a hybrid meeting? Does it need to be an off-site meeting? What information do I need to share? Tim, I think you referenced this when you said knowing, the information you need to bring, et cetera. What's the data that I need to share in a particular meeting? I think, if we're having weekly individual meetings, cookbook metrics are important. We certainly train clients on that, having those type of discussions with, with their sales teams on, that particular type of data. And then how do I facilitate participation in my meeting, right? And then lastly, can I get it done in the time allotted? Why do we have that one? Tim, why did you put that one as the 8th bullet point?
Yeah, you want to make sure that you're building the right amount of time in. So if you have an hour set aside for a meeting, just you've got to stay on task and on track and not be rabbit holing and squirreling all over the place, and going long and getting off topic. So if the goal of the meetings is to have an efficient, effective meeting that has a purpose, then you've got to also, time bind that thing and make sure that you're not, jumping off into something strategic or tactical that isn't related to what you're supposed to be meeting on.
Yeah, and I think that most of us on this call, we don't suffer from a lack of busyness, right? So when a meeting goes long and we become unstructured and that meeting goes long, we're often interrupting, other important parts of the day. We're pushing things back. Not only that, we tend to get more stuff done. If we have an hour meeting, we set an agenda, we stick to an agenda, we set a time, we stick to a time. We can actually increase our performance rather than having them loose and flexible and, taking a half an hour that ends up being a 90-minute meeting. All right, second step in creating great meetings is setting an example of accountability. Tim, what do we mean by setting an example of accountability here?
Yeah, I mean, the just in and of itself, being able to have metrics and performance metrics, whatever it is, whether you're in sales or customer service, you have to live what it is that you're holding your team accountable for. And so, just to speak to the slide that you popped up, expect and deliver on time start and on time stop. Don't goof around with it. Don't start making excuses for it. If you're going to hold other people accountable to their calendars, then don't be messing with a sloppy meeting that runs over, and don't accept, people being late. I think the other thing is expect and facilitate participation. One of the things that some leaders do is they'll start out a meeting and they'll say, okay, this is the purpose of the meeting. Here's what I think. And then they vomit out, and it murders the participation, because most other people are going to either be in alignment or they'll stomp their own voice and not give a differing opinion or add their real 2 cents in. And so I think that's another piece of the accountability piece. Expect and collect homework and feedback. And this is one where people get a little bit nervous when they hear the word feedback, but what we know is that the only place that you have growth is when you give and get feedback, when you have people that are showing you and pointing out some blind spots or some areas for opportunity for growth. And then last, set clear action items and expect results. So if you're setting that example of accountability in the meeting, people know what's going to happen after the meeting, and that's what we mean in this regards.
Yeah, and I'll comment on the second to last bullet point there. So in a previous meeting, if I expect that there's homework to be done or I assign homework as a leader, I need to collect on that. Because one of the things that will kill a good meeting vibe, going back to an earlier slide, is we say, hey, we need to collect this data. A meeting goes by, we don't do anything with it. Then people get frustrated because I did that homework and it didn't mean anything. I collected that information and we did nothing with it. The other thing about feedback is make sure our meetings are a safe place, right? We talked about hostility in meetings earlier. We certainly don't want, meetings to be a place where there's fear involved. I don't want to be afraid to go to a meeting because I might be attacked or somebody might, give me grief about my thoughts, my ideas, or call them out as stupid, et cetera. So the second one is set an example of accountability. The next one, if you're running a meeting, facilitate productive communication and an exchange of ideas. I heard a great quote, which I've included in here. There's not a single one of us that is as smart as all of us. And I was talking to John Vanderslice the other day about this particular session, and he shared a great story with me, which I'll share here. And John, if you listen to this, forgive me for I'm maybe not getting all the details correctly, but when he was working in big corporate America, and he was a leader in big corporate America, had a meeting which involved the CEO, who I believe there was an engineer in the room, and they asked for the engineer's idea and opinion on something. And somebody else in the meeting stepped up and said, basically, you're wrong, or that idea is not good or good enough. And after the engineer sat down at the table that John was at, the engineer leaned over and said, I'm never going to give an opinion again in this meeting. And the idea there is that one, shutting down that communication, that exchange of ideas is going to prevent somebody who arguably is a brilliant mind from participating in that meeting potentially ever again. Right? So I thought that was a great story that John shared with me, and that's why I wanted to share it with you guys. We've got to be very, very careful that we're not unintentionally shutting down communication in our meetings. So make sure that we're facilitating productive communication and exchange of ideas. The next one will appeal to you if you are a Sandler client. If you're not a Sandler client, then hopefully this will make sense. But Tim, talk a little bit about keeping your critical parent at home.
Yeah, so in the world of Sandler, we talk about the various ego states, and one of the ego states is is a parent state, and there's two of those: critical parent and nurturing parent. The nurturing parent is the one where, like my mom was the nurturing parent, and if I did something and skinned my knee, my mom would nurturingly, lovingly, pick me up, dust me off, and deal with the fact that I was crying because I skinned my knee. The critical parent, on the other hand, is the exact opposite parent, and that's the one where that's the parent state where you lash out and you go into this very critical positioning. And what happens, the problem there is that it really stifles conversation, and it stomps the flow of conversation because people tend to retreat when they feel attacked.
Absolutely. And we've got to leave our critical parent at home during a meeting, right? It's not our place to, again, the previous slide said, let's facilitate communication. Critical parent shuts it right down because it's me in the parent state yelling at you in the child state, and that's not productive at all. That's going to produce an undesirable response, especially when you think about communication. Now, speaking of communication, it is incredibly important that we as leaders know and understand the communication styles of our attendees, especially if it's regular or recurring meetings. We want to make sure that we don't leave somebody out or behind because we're talking right through them. And let me give you an example. I may present some data in a meeting and I may say, hey, check the data out. We won, right? Woohoo, let's celebrate and move on. If I'm in a room full of people whose primary communication style has to do with understanding not only the data, but the why behind the data, they may miss out. They may say, well, I don't understand why we're celebrating, or how was it that we won, or what went into winning, right? So I've got to understand my audience involved. If I've got an engineer in the room, I may want to speak to those details, right? If I've got somebody, a room full of people who are dominant, I may want to speak, so I've got to understand their different styles so I can facilitate, again, very positive, very productive communication. Only meet to create value. Now, this probably should have been the very first slide, right? Only meet to create value. How do we create value? And I'm going to put a bunch of D words up here, but anytime that we need to make a decision, probably should be meeting, right? That's a good reason to have a meeting. The next one, if I've got to provide direction or coordinate execution, that's a good reason to have a meeting, right? That creates value. If I, as a leader, am going to be talking about how do we execute, how do we provide direction, good reason to have a meeting. So next one is the sharing of data. Right? If we've got data that can help us, especially with the second bullet point above, that's a great reason to have a meeting. If I've got to educate the troops or disseminate information that can help them with their education, that's a great reason to have a meeting. It creates value. If I need to have an open discussion with my team to facilitate buy-in, that's a great reason to have a meeting. And all of these can help us create value within a meeting, the reasons to have a meeting, et cetera. Tim, comments so far on this? I got a couple more to go through, but.
No, you know what, there's another few slides to hit, but I just think that, again, these are, you've got to really think about, the concept of creating the purpose of the meeting in the first place. And so, yeah, I want to keep going because I know we got a lot to cover in just a couple minutes to go, so.
Discovery or idea generation, again, that's value creation in terms of, reasons to have a meeting, how I might have a meeting, ensuring that I have productive, effective, efficient meetings. So in summary, let's break these down one by one because some of you on the call just want to focus on the main ideas, right? Number one, have a rock solid agenda. Tim spoke to that earlier. Right? Pre-planning is key. And this is important for me because I like to wing it. I'll be honest, I'll call it what it is. I'm really good in the moment, or at least I think I am. And I like to wing it, but I know that the more prepared I am for a meeting, the smoother they go and the more effective they are. Number two, set that example of accountability, right? Be the meeting that you want to have. If you're frustrated because people are late, stop accepting it, right? One of the practices that I've seen from a client is, look, at 2 minutes after or 3 minutes after, I forget the exact number, but it was pretty quick, you're not in the room, the door is locked. You're gonna have to knock on the door, and the expectation is you're gonna knock on the door and be embarrassed when you walk through because we want a meeting to start. Now, that doesn't work for everybody's culture, I get it. But that's what they did in order to set that example of accountability, and it didn't take very long before everybody was at that one. It happened to be a 1 o'clock meeting. People were dilly-dallying on their lunch hour, and they wanted a meeting to start on a particular day at 1 p.m., so that's what they did. And sometimes we have to be that accountability. Facilitate productive communication and an exchange of ideas. We've got to be the ones to do that. We cannot stifle communication by allowing our critical parent to show up in the meeting. Next one, know and understand your communication styles. If you're a Sandler client, you know and understand DISC. Many of you on this call know it and understand it. Bring that to your meetings and use it to understand the type of people that you're talking to and communicate in their style so that you can have those effective and efficient meetings. And then lastly, only meet to create value. Tim, final word from you before we wrap this one up.
Yeah, I think Brian Goldbeck actually made a great point in chat that it's great to make meetings very interactive, get your audience involved, and that speaks very much to facilitate productive communication. The last thing that you should do as a leader is to come out and vomit out what you think the solution is. The graphic that you used, Jim, was perfect for that. One mind is not anywhere near as strong as many minds, and the important part is to have the right mindset going in as the leader of the meeting, and then you'll have amazing meetings moving forward. So,
absolutely. All right, that's 30 minutes on facilitating great meetings. If you need help on this, reach out to us. We are here to help. So just tell us that you caught our grab and go. You want some more information on great meetings, we're happy to help you, or any topic that we've done. I think we're up to 30 some topics that we've done in our grab and go sessions. Our contact information is here. We thank you, and we will see you next week on another grab and go growth tactics webinar.
Thank you, everybody. See you next week.
All right. By the way, as you're leaving, throw a comment in here and tell us your one takeaway. I forgot to say that.
Oops.
I love it when we get takeaways, Tim.
Yep, I do too.
Yeah. All right. Everybody have a great day. Appreciate you taking the time to be with us, and Tim, I'll give you a call a little later.
All right, right on.
All right, we'll see
Ciao.
you. Thanks, guys and gals.